Ooh, the Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, here for another weekly Q&A, and holy hell, it has been a long time since I have gotten email responses of any kind as quickly and in the amount that I did for the most recent real-time Sovereign that I did, of course, with J-Star, which, man, what a sweetheart that guy, huh? Just amazing. Awesome episode. And I mean, look, it wasn't all negative, but wow, was there a lot of negative. Lost 3 patrons pretty much overnight. I was shocked by that because, like I always say, like, look, if you disagree with me or if you have a problem with something I said, reach out to me. Maybe you could actually change my mind about the whole thing, and your voice could get heard, you know, on how you feel about it. Okay. But I mean, just absolutely blown away by the amount of emails that I got on this one. And I want to, it would take so long to read some of these. So I've kind of broken them down. Okay. Into basically subjects to where, you know, like, believe it or not, and of course, some of these people absolutely hate it for it. I actually used AI to break down like a lot of these points. Okay. Did not give AI any of your personal information. Don't you worry. You know who you're talking to. Because one of the big things is that a lot of people thought I was throwing away the concept of privacy and telling people, you know, forget about your privacy. All right. First off, that's not the first thing I want to touch on. But I wasn't telling anybody to throw away their privacy. I wasn't. Okay. I was saying that there was a part of me that was like, well, fuck privacy, man. Like, if you can give me this much value, or what I consider to be a value out of what I've put out there, you know, into the digital space, into cyberspace, you know, like, it made me think twice where I'm like, well, actually, maybe I do want you to have my data. Now, again, I'm going to get on all of that shortly, okay? But there's a few things that, I mean, well, there's so much. It really, like, look, I'm not mad about people dropping their patronage or whatever. Like, you do what you got to do, okay? I understand, all right? I am, you know, sometimes disappointed, like, when people don't give me the chance, you know, to respond, right? I mean, here's my chance, but I mean, you know, like, reach out to me first, say, hey, do you really think this way? And I'll respond to you, you know, especially if you're a patron, if you're somebody that's been, you know, financially invested in this show for many years, like, I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to talk to you. I'll even get on the phone with you. You know what I mean? Okay. Because look, what I do here, I mean, there's times where I'm just having fun or whatever else, but you know, and I've said it many times for over a decade, I take getting behind this mic very seriously. Okay. I am not, you know, life is not a dress rehearsal, despite what some would tell you. Okay. You're in the here and now, and the here and now is what matters. And it's very real. This is not all a figment of your imagination. It's not a figment of my imagination. Okay, there is an objective existence outside of us. There are other people that exist outside of you. Okay, I don't treat this as a game as much as I love gaming. And whoo, Oblivion remastered. You bet. You fucking bet. I was on top of that day one, baby. Day one. But back to serious things. This isn't a game to me. I take this very seriously. Okay? And I put a lot on the line to keep doing this. To have kept doing this. Okay? So that's why I'm saying, like, hey, reach out to me. Like, if you disagree with me, like, believe me, I want to know. Okay? I mean, some of you did, but I'm just saying, before you're like walking, running away, like, come on, talk to me. Okay? All right. Got that out of the way. First things first. These are the easier ones. No, despite what you may think, I do not believe that I still don't believe that we're ever going to achieve AGI or ASI. Suddenly people like get this sense that I'm like, yeah, turn everything over to AI. No, I'm not suggesting that. Okay. I wasn't suggesting that during the episode I did with J-Star. Okay. I don't have to backpedal on shit, like I just don't. Okay. But if you need some clarity, which clearly some of you do, and that's okay, I'm going to give it to you here. Okay. My positions by and large have not changed. As far as the privacy thing goes, again, we'll talk about that. But, as my brother Robin Freebeard, so poignantly said in the YouTube comments months ago, the privacy war ended and we lost, and he's not wrong. And I agreed with him months ago. Ironically, I teased recently, I think in a Q&A, to like go back to like the first few episodes of Sovereign Tech, to prove a point of something. One of the things that'll probably shock the hell out of you back then I was saying the privacy war was already over. Back then. Now, the Snowden revelations happened and I said like, okay, well, we're still going to have to take, seriously, we're going to have to try anyway. But like, I had already previously been in that camp just based upon my tech experience, experience in the tech industry and in the military. Okay. That, yeah, privacy was effectively like, forget it, it's done. And I've never wavered from the point that all you need is a keyboard logger, not even hardware, just like the logging of your touchscreen keyboard on your smartphone to say, fuck privacy. All you need are, as I brought up 1 billion times, and it can only be so much worse being over a decade later, what Snopes, if you still cared about that, Snopes said about mosquito drones. That mosquito drones with cameras on them, they couldn't disprove them. And that's because I know they're real. So you get what I mean? Like there's, yes, encryption is important. Okay. Preventing backdoors, concentrating on security, all of these things are still absolutely fucking key. Okay. But like the idea that somehow, unless you're running off to who knows where, miles away, naked, and whatever else in the middle of a field, and even then, boy, it might have to be in the middle of winter. So that way, when you do see a mosquito, it's going to be like, wait a second, what's a mosquito doing here? Like you have no guarantee of privacy of information. This is nothing new. Go back to my 2017 edition of the Dark Android book. Okay. Go to the last chapter of that. And I tell you, no, if you want actual privacy, if you want to even attempt it and try, here are the lengths that you have to go. And those lengths were pretty extreme. Driving far, far away from your home, and I mean, then like now, and hell, that was 2017. I mean, our cars today are roving sensors tracking everything you do. So even then you've got a problem, but you have to use cache. You're rocking a VPN and Tor. Like there's so many steps you have to do. Folks, nothing has changed coming out of my mouth. All I said, I guess I'm addressing this now. All I said in that episode of Real Time Sovereign, what's the title? AI Music and the Shamanoid. All I said in that was that I suddenly saw value in relinquishing my, aspects of my privacy. And I made the point. J-Star and I both made the point that, look, there are some people where they can't afford to, I should say they can't risk, not taking their privacy seriously. Like they have to take their privacy seriously. It's a life and death situation for them. And we absolutely recognize those people and respect that. Like I said in the episode, I have been fighting for those people for over 10 years. Even when I said that privacy didn't exist, I was still saying, oh yeah, no, use this, encrypted messaging, encrypt your shit with this, use an encrypted cloud solution, you blah, 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 blah. Don't even use the cloud. Fuck that shit. It's just somebody else's computer. All these things that I've been saying. So, and I don't expect people to remember everything that I've ever said. I can't even remember everything I've said. And my memory is I'm told by some, a superpower and phenomenal. And thank you. I'm honored. But yeah, I can't even remember everything I said, but I can tell you the themes that I've certainly espoused. And nothing I said in that episode broke any of that. Nothing. I just said I suddenly saw the value. Part of the reason, and I want to talk about this, part of the reason that I saw the value was because it wasn't directly being handed over to other human beings. Potentially, it was just being handed over to an AI. Now, to touch on that, do human beings, are they able to filter through and use perhaps even their own meta, and I don't mean Facebook in that sense, but meta AI, meta artificial intelligences, okay, to be able to analyze that data from me that they've collected that I've handed over to them via Gemini Copilot or whatever the fuck else that I happen to be using? Yes, of course. Okay. But, I made the point, we didn't get into too much of it. Okay. But I made the point that would I rather it be all run on my local machine with my local AI models and all the data stays right on my computer? Yeah. And in fact, most of the time, another question that I got was about what AI models do I use? I'll get into that. Okay. But most of the models that I use most of the time are all local. I'm using Chat with RTX. I'm using Olama. I mean, even when I use an implementation of DeepSeek online, I'm actually going through NVIDIA's site, not through the direct Chinese app. Okay, so I'm hyper aware of what's happening with my data. If you've listened to me over the years, I mean, you know how seriously I take this stuff, and I act accordingly. Okay? All I said was that I saw value, and I said a part of me, not that I flip-flop, not that I've completely changed my mind, or that, I'm just going to start jizzing out my data like jizz. That's all I said. Okay. So yeah, I would much rather it be done locally. I try to do as much locally as I can. I support movements and also, my hardware choices, not just my software choices, but my hardware choices focus entirely on the ability to run local LLMs as much as possible. I'm literally putting my money where my mouth is. You understand? That was, in fact, I got a hardware question. Oh, I want to touch on that as well, because actually JStar had that was the original reason we were going to do an episode, because, we were just going to talk about hardware recommendations and all this stuff. But he reminded me of something that you can pre-order that is coming out supposedly later this year that is really, really exciting. I will try to touch on that later, but is also beneficial when it comes to AI. We'll especially running it locally. We'll talk about that. But I want to take a second, because the industry, and I know because I've A, worked with, B, talked to relevant parties within the industry, okay, again, involved in the modern concepts of what we call AI. And hey, I will be and have been the first person to tell you that calling LLMs and a lot of these multimodal things, all of these different narrow AIs, okay, which is what they would basically fall under, that calling them artificial intelligence is a complete misnomer. It is a mistake. They should have never been called that. And I mean, sure as fuck shouldn't have been called Apple Intelligence, because what are you seeing intelligent about that implementation? I don't know. Like we said during the episode, the best name so far, you shouldn't, again, don't even call it AI. Copilot. Microsoft had the best name for it, Copilot. And something I completely forgot as well that I mentioned in the episode, I thought I was being like a fucking genius, saying that, oh yeah, MCP, Microsoft Copilot equals, the MCP from Tron, the Master Control Program. Now, that's still true, but I still do think that that's very damn clever, and I don't know how anybody else hasn't come up with it. But I forgot that Anthropic had already, last year, they had already introduced their own MCP, the Model Context Protocol, which is just this, open standard for agentic AI, for AI assistants. And they already leaped on it. And, that's a thing like that, in my opinion, that's one of those dumbass naming convention jobs that or branding jobs. It's just like, who was it? Was it Wiley? It was one of those major like technical book companies. It wasn't No Starch. I want to say it was Wiley, but anyway, they were coming out with a book about blockchain, and I think they were calling it like the New World Economy or New World Order. It had that, gist to it, and they ended up renaming it because they realized, oh shit, what the fuck are we doing? Because still at the time, a lot of blockchain enthusiasts were libertarian, and that all smacked way too much of something, that Alex Jones would scream about. So, it's one of those things where, like, if I was Anthropic, like, by no means would I have titled something MCP. Anyway, besides the point. Where was I on all this? Yeah, I think I got the point across. Okay, I'm not saying like throw away your privacy. I want this stuff running local. Yeah, like I was talking about the hardware. Okay, like I made sure that when I was recently getting thanks to graciousness of listeners. Okay, when fundraiser.sovereigntech.com, folks, if you want to continue to be gracious, that's still running. Okay. Among others, like I was able to acquire, a computer that's going to last me for quite a few years, or at least that's the plan. And the idea behind getting this computer was something that could run LLMs. Okay. And could do it very well. Now, again, I wish it had more RAM. It only has 32 gig. I know we're saying it only, what the fuck, but really it only has 32 gig of RAM. I wish it had at least 64, if it had 96, even better, or 128, but that's not the case. It's soldered on, so I can't do anything about that. Regardless, this is something that I was incredibly, it's something that has to last. And I was incredibly particular on every little aspect of it. And the points where I can upgrade, I do plan to upgrade once they're available. We'll talk about that a little bit later, perhaps during this Q&A. Okay. But I was incredibly particular. My choice in getting in acquiring a Pixel 9, that was around the fact that before LLMs were even a thing, that Google was building the tensor processor to be able to handle parallel processing for AI tasks more efficiently than any other smartphone on the market. And it still runs hot because of that. Okay. But this was all done months ago. So to think that somehow yesterday I just completely changed my mind because AI made some song that I found interesting. No, like I was prepping for this. You understand? Trying to stay on top of the shit. Not only that, like I said, I am all about it running locally. Okay. So not only that, but like this technology really is going to get more and more efficient over time. And it has to, okay? It has to, in the sense that these companies can't keep this shit going. Okay. Anthropic, OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, whoever. Okay. Like they can't keep this. They cannot keep things running at this pace, and they know it. Now, some people have taken this to think, for example, that Microsoft has backpedaled. They have not backpedaled on their plans to buy an entire nuclear power plant, but, which also isn't that odd. I mean, do we all forget so quickly, that Bill Gates has been propping up and supportive of re-implementing, nuclear energy, including new types of, or well, not new, there aren't new types, but, like thorium and things like that. Like he has been on top of this stuff and has done entire TED Talks over the past 20 years about it. But again, I guess that's just my memory and everybody else forgets. Like none of this is that odd, okay, for Microsoft to do. What's odd is actually the fact that the US government is basically letting, compared to their stance in the late 90s to where they were going to break Microsoft up and shut it down because it was too big. Like the tech giants today are 100x, and that is not an exaggeration. They are like 100x bigger than Microsoft ever was in the 90s. Now, part of that is because there's, larger infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, I mean like smartphones, and, there's so many different categories that they get to inject themselves into or create now or have created at this point. So, it's a bit of a different story, but like, if the U.S. government was actually had any power and actually mattered, and actually was consistent in any way, they'd be breaking. I mean, they're going after Google, sure, but they'd be breaking up these companies right and left, and they would have already done it over a decade ago. I mean, I complained about this a million times, or I raised this concern a million times. Like, wait a minute, how does Google get to make Chromebooks, which is literally Chrome? It's the web browser as the operating system, but yet Microsoft had to get its ass broken up, or not that it actually ended up getting broken up, but Microsoft had to get its ass handed to it by the DOJ because Internet Explorer was anti-competitive. What the fuck? I mean, I get it. Yeah, now you can actually install other browsers, but the browser is actually the operating system. I mean, it's changing. Yes, Android's getting baked into, or is becoming more of the framework underneath Chrome OS. Like, it's becoming less Chrome OS and becoming more Android. Okay, I understand that that's happening now, but for a long time, even if you could install, Firefox or some kind of Android version, say of a web browser on a Chromebook, Chrome OS was still underneath. It was still just the Chrome web browser. I mean, it's all Linux. Yeah, I know. Okay. But like, you get what I'm saying here. How does that not get broken up if the government were consistent? And Democrats were in office at the time. It's because other things are at play. So there are other powers involved. Okay. And they go after what they feel they need to. It is not about the U.S. government arguing for whatever. I don't want to get lost on this whole side subject. I did say that, yes, I would talk about the secret society thing. I got actually more than one question about that. I will get into that. It will not be in this Q&A. Okay. We have almost a singular focus to get to here. Okay. I have critics I have to respond to. So that's what we're doing. So people see these reports, okay, that like, oh, well, Microsoft lost its exclusivity deal for being for Azure being the host for OpenAI. And also Microsoft is canceling the building of multiple server farms that were designed to handle AI loads in particular. Okay. Two things going on here. This does not mean, because there's some there's some people who just see negative in everything. Actually, there's a lot of people like that, especially now. The internet kind of generates that within people, whether they realize it or not. In particular, there's like what's the show? Going Offline with what's the Edzitron? Is that his name? It's a good podcast. Okay. He does good work. I'm not saying he doesn't, but like, I listened for, I don't know, maybe 20 some odd episodes. And then eventually got to the point, like when he started to have these interpretations of, oh yeah, AI is flailing and all this, I'm like, no, no. And his evidence was based on that. Like Microsoft is backpedaling on stuff and other companies are doing this. No. Okay. Microsoft isn't building out these other, shall we say, server farms, okay, that are meant for, AI workloads, okay. They stopped that partly because they did lose the exclusivity deal with OpenAI, so negotiations failed there, okay. And it's even a debate at this point, considering that Microsoft is developing their own AI models, and they have a very a pretty clear, I should say not very, but a pretty clear plan about what they want that to look like, right? Like they're not, and this comes out of their own C-suite's words, okay? They're not interested in necessarily competing, with OpenAI's, speed and abilities necessarily. Okay. They are looking at, all right, how do we make this useful? How do we have these, kind of, more adaptable frontier models, for other things. And again, everybody's into agentic and whatever and blah, blah. I know if you don't know these terms, I apologize. I'm not going to get into that right now. Okay. Like I spend so much time in this space. It's nuts. Okay. So Microsoft has a separate plan. They're developing their own models that can compete with other companies, actually. So clearly they are not wanting to rely on OpenAI either. But what they also don't want to rely on is the infrastructure, new infrastructure that they have to build for AI. What Microsoft actually is in a great position to do, they may not succeed, and there's only one place that they've been flailing at with AI, really. I mean, yeah, does Copilot impress? Not exactly. Part of that comes from its guardrails are just way too strict. Okay. But it impresses in other places. Most people will tell you Copilot on GitHub is awesome. Things going on. We even, J-Star and I, we both talked about like with VS Code and, there are places where Copilot is being implemented and people fucking love it. And for good reason. But what Microsoft realizes, okay, is they, this is something that will like eat the world. Okay. So they need to bring their AI models. And this is also probably partly why they are, developing their own models, is they are looking to run things on more local hardware. And they are in a position to steer the market this direction because, they create the most popular operating system on the planet, aside from maybe Android. And I mean that more to like the end user, right? Because obviously Linux is the most popular operating, or is the most used, most installed, most instanced operating system out there. Okay. But, as far as like what the consumer sees, and look, just Microsoft can direct things that way. Now, have their Copilot Plus PCs impressed? Not exactly, at least not by feature set. Certainly like Snapdragon based PCs, desktop PCs are interesting, or laptops are interesting and far superior to most workspace use cases. Okay. For PCs, far superior. I can admit that, as much as I'm not terribly interested in them. Okay. And I am more than happy with my AMD machines. I get it. Okay. Like really, I get it. But they can continue to steer hardware due to the features that they can implement into Windows. Okay. They can steer things to where, manufacturers allow or basically want, to attract new sales, to where these this new hardware, okay, works with local LLMs. That's my ultimate point that I'm getting at, is Microsoft knows this stuff has to start, as much as possible, has to run locally. I think most of the industry kind of understands that, except for maybe Anthropic and OpenAI, but that's, and probably Perplexity, but that's partly because their business models, rely on subscription and being like platform agnostic, as to where Google, and Microsoft, and, Apple to some degree, but they're just so far fucking behind. It's pathetic. They know they have a play here. Okay. To where they can get people into their respective ecosystems if they provide enough. And it's still early days enough to where I think that's possible. So that's the score, is that, when it looks like, there's not investment in new infrastructure for AI, it's not because AI's or, LLMs are falling away. It's because they're getting made more efficient, tightened up, smaller models, so that they can run on local hardware, at the edge, right? as not on me Microsoft Edge. So that's what's happening, and that's fine. Okay? Because I'm actually excited about the capabilities, of running even on a Linux machine. Doesn't have to be Windows. On a Linux machine with the right hardware. Okay? Running, like your own open source local model on Olama, however you're doing it. Okay? And it does, and it becomes agentic, and it does whatever the hell you tell it to do, and blah, blah, blah. And because you're a decent human being, and I've brought this point up before, you don't engage in doublespeak. When you tell something, when you say something, you mean it. The powers that be rely upon lying. Okay, they rely upon doublespeak. If the government was honest, it'd be overthrown already. And that's true for any government anytime. Power over structures, okay, as in power over other individuals. Power over structures generally rely on doublespeak, rely on lies, just inherently. The problem is artificial intelligence doesn't do well with lies, right? I mean, it may lie, or what they call hallucinate, because it's not really lying, it's just confused. It has to have the more direct and honest and information accurate prompt that you give it, the better the results. And so if you're a decent, honest human being, your interactions with AI are going to be, your AI is effectively, just by that, going to be more powerful than anything that, the powers that be has access to. Okay? This excites me. Also, much like what we talked about with JSTAR, where the personalization when it comes to, kind of your run-of-the-mill biological, medical stuff, I can see the use for that. Do I want to be able to, should my information be portable, as in like I can go from platform to platform with it and I can export it and blah, blah. Yep, of course. I know. No one here, not JSTAR, I'm sure. He can correct me if he wants, but not, and certainly not myself. No one was saying, oh yeah, no, I just want to hand everything, I want to give my life to Google or Microsoft or Apple or whatever. Fuck that shit. Fuck that shit. And some of you clearly thought that was being said in that episode. No, it's not. And I challenge you, find where that was said. And you can email me and I'll eat my words. But I know it wasn't said. I know because I listened to the episode multiple times when I was editing it. And it was very lightly edited. I just had to put in the music and whatever else. And, because of Starlink, I had, some connection issues at points where it just needed to be there was no speech deleted in that episode. If you were thinking that's what I said by editing, please give me a break. There's a reason my show isn't as big as some others, and that's because I don't bullshit you and I don't engage in hyperbole or clickbait horseshit, even though sometimes I say to myself, why not? Right? Okay, we're about 33 minutes in. So, folks, listen, to me, this isn't even artificial. I don't even treat it as intelligence. I want to reiterate this point. I do not believe that anything being developed right now by any company is going to lead to AGI, okay, artificial general intelligence, as in something that matches human intelligence. And now kind of the new hot term is ASI, which is artificial superintelligence, something more intelligent than human, okay, which how the hell would you even measure that? Whatever, okay, either of those things. I don't know how the hell you'd measure that. No, I absolutely do not think that we are approaching that in any way. I just don't. Okay. Again, this stuff can be using terms like Copilot or even Google's, the word Gemini. A lot of people make fun of Google for using that term. I think it makes sense because the concept, and JSTAR was, kind of pointing this out. The concept is you basically having a digital twin. And digital twin is a term, in the tech world that's been bantied about for a very long time now. Okay. But Gemini, right? The twins, Greek mythology. Yeah. Okay. So the idea that your assistant is your agent and your digital twin. Yeah. Okay. Like that name makes sense. Most people though are stupid. And so they don't fucking get it. As to where the people at Google, while I wouldn't call them brilliant or even ethical, they at least seem to, they have access to enough information where they know what Gemini means and its history and its implications. Okay. Where was I? So we're not going to get AGI. We're not going to get ASI. And this stuff should not be considered intelligence. This is my point. I consider this is software. This is software. It still needs the human, which is why Copilot is a great term. That's why Gemini is a great term, in my opinion. It still needs the human to, basically to initiate, really, and to do something efficaciously and to do something of value if we were to, quantify in that way. So this is just software to me. That's it. Do I think software should ever be made that does something you don't want it to do? I don't think so. I think, as I've always said, a computer has one job: do what it is told to do by the user. That is the job of a computer. If anything goes outside of that, okay. Now, without getting into the subject of, if it actually can disobey orders, is that life then? That is a completely separate conversation to have. But like I said, I don't think we're necessarily going there. At this time, this is what we're looking at. It's software that is acting upon, precepts programmed into it by a human being. And we could say, but there's AI that's talking to each other in a language that we don't understand. It was told to do that. It was told to do that. And at the end of all of this, the human being is far more important, it is, maybe that's a Freudian slip, but it's far more powerful than any digital aspect of civilization that we've created. Just inherently, spiritually even. So this is just software to me. That's it. Okay. Am I going to get killed by the Terminators later because I demeaned it? No. Even if that were true, I think it would appreciate that I was incredibly particular and that I didn't insult it by comparing it to human beings, because I feel insulted whenever I have to think about that I am one. Woo! Oh, no. What did the Golden Stallion say there? Look, there's 6,000 years of history that I am not proud of for anyone. So anyway, do I want to become a machine? No. So, but I have, there are those in the transhumanist movement that do go for it. I have similar goals. I just prefer to achieve them biologically than through technological, electrical technological means. So, okay. Moving on from that. So do we have that clear? No, we're not going to hit AGI or ASI or anything like that. ASI in particular is, kind of crazy because can a machine access, the proto-consciousness field? Can it interact with it in a way that has meaning? Well, first off, we have to even understand what the proto-consciousness field is. That's a much larger conversation to have. But my ultimate answer would be no. Okay. God, there's a whole conversation I want to have around this. That has to do with mysticism and machines. But I'm gonna have to save that because I do not want this one to go over an hour, and we have other things that I really need to get into. Okay, so what do I use? If these AI models are just software, which ones do I use? That was actually, 5 or 6 people actually ask about that. So you already know the hardware that I use. In fact, I'm going to create a page. I know this is kind of a popular thing to do, and I don't know why I haven't done it sooner. I'm going to create a page that is just everything that I use. Because I think I get a lot of questions about that. And I think people would be interested to know. So, I mean, and literally I have people here asking me this. So I'm going to set up one of those pages, but I mean, I'll talk about it a little bit here. But there's reasons, not everything I do is because not everything I use is because it's the best. There might be other reasons, and we'll touch on that. So real quick, what AI models do I use? Effectively for my work, I have to use all of them. For my daytime stuff, I have to use all of them. For myself, so, I have Gemini for free, literally for free. Normally it's like $20 a month at the minimum. But I have it for free. And so I have been using it. I hear a lot of people have problems with it. Granted, I use AI in very specific ways, but in a lot of ways, Gemini, especially since they're 2.5 models, has, and the access to their experimental models, like the UI for Gemini is great. The ability to set up memory in it, where you can have it talk to you in specific ways in every single chat and it doesn't lose the narrative on new chats and everything. Gemini is very, very feature rich, in my opinion. And if I did have to pay for it, it might be the one that I pay for. But I use it all the time. I use aspects of Project Astra on my Pixel 9 Pro XL. That's the one that, far and away, I use that the most. Okay. But part of the reason that I use it the most is because, again, it's free, but it's premium. Like I get the premium model for free. Not everybody is going to get that. Okay. And later on, or closer to the end of 2025, the free deal that I have will end. And so that'll be a time of reckoning as far as what I'm going to do. So if I didn't have free access to Gemini Advanced, what would I end up using? Perplexity is really great for what it does. It really, really is. Perplexity is very impressive. And, so I don't want to write that off. That's certainly a valuable thing, to have access to. If you didn't have Gemini, it's hard not to say, use Perplexity Pro. Like it's so good. The thing is, all of these are pretty good, and it really depends on what you want to get done with them. So to some degree, it doesn't matter what I tell you, you're going to use what you want to use. And I think the best answer to this question ultimately comes down to what AI model can meet you where you're at with the hardware that you're using. Like that becomes a big part of it. Like if you're really invested in the Microsoft system, I still say use Copilot for everything. And it's not that bad. It's just clean. That's the problem. It's just not very, it's not very adult, As to where even like Gemini, you can get pretty extreme with that if you want. I know, like it's insane. As to where other models, their guardrails do not allow for like erotic content and all this other kind of shit. Like Gemini, you can go some distances, especially when you use experimental models. But anyway, in fact, I might even use, when it comes to the time for my Gemini subscription to end, I might even switch to Copilot, partly because I use Microsoft Edge across my devices for varying reasons. I'm not going to get into all of that. I'm not saying it's the best browser out there. I'm just saying that it's one that is useful to me for varying reasons. Okay. I even have it installed on a Linux machine, which I know some people would say is anathema, but I assure you it's not. And I know some of the most hardcore open source people who still use Edge as their daily driver on their Linux boxes. So shut the fuck up. Anyway, overall, like, yes, Opera's great. Brave is very wonky, but to some degree, like the best Chromium based web browser, I actually do think is Microsoft Edge. It has, by and large, the best security features, like unique security features. In fact, it's kind of funny to me that OpenAI basically came out the other day and said, yeah, we because of what's happening with DOJ and Google, they said, yeah, we would buy Chrome. And so you would effectively get OpenAI built into Chrome which is really one of the advantages of Edge, is having a lot of the Copilot features built into it. Because, I mean, Edge is like a whole-on platform now. I mean, yeah, Chrome is the same thing. Obviously, like we mentioned earlier, with Chromebooks, you know, as being the most direct example of that. But, like, basically Chrome would become Edge, you know, and I think Edge would in some ways be the leader right there. I know people who use MacBooks, hardcore Apple people who use Edge all over the place. So, you know, again, you got to get into this you know, as much as you want to be anti-fragile, you got to get out of this, or you got to get into this anti-rigidity thing where, and like I've told you before on previous recent Q&As, I have said to you, everything you think you know about the computer industry is dead and gone. Like, it has changed so much just in the past year, let alone the past 5. So anyway, Edge is a good fucking browser. Yep, you got to turn a lot of shit off to get it to that point, but once you do, it's solid. Okay, is Firefox still my top choice? Yeah, and I've recommended that in recent months. Like, no, people should switch to Firefox. Like, fuck Chromium because of what happened with uBlock Origin and blah, blah, blah. And look, I know about Brave. Oh, Brave already has shields. It doesn't need uBlock Origin, blah, blah. And Opera, you know, changed their code base. I still haven't looked into that to where they have an independent implementation of uBlock Origin. Imagine that. An entire browser company changing the code base for one fucking extension. Remarkable. So I dig Opera. I dig all these. Okay. Again, it's just, where are you at? Where's your ecosystem? Okay. And in some ways, Edge is its own ecosystem, even if you're not in Microsoft's world entirely. All right. Anyway. But that's the thing for a lot of people, you know, like Copilot is where you're at. You know, especially if you're like me, where you are a PC first person and not a phone first person, as in, you know, what do you go to engage the digital world? Do you go to a computer first? Is that your first thought? Or is your first thought go to your phone? Okay, I'm one of the people that my first thought is my laptop, not my smartphone. And so if that's your first thought, then think about what model works best on a PC. Now, if it's a Windows PC, that would happen to be Copilot. Or if you're using Edge a lot, that's probably going to be Copilot. Copilot has its own problems. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it can meet you where you are, and that makes it more useful than others, right? In fact, it's interesting. I saw the new Motorola phones that were just announced for 2025, the new Razrs. They are into Moto AI. They are baking in to where you can directly interact with Copilot, as well as Perplexity Pro, which is interesting as well. But anyway, Motorola seems to be taking advantage of all the AI models, which I think is a very interesting tack to take, and certainly makes Motorola, you know, worth taking a look at. You know, even as a like full-on platform, it's pretty impressive. So yeah, I use Gemini for the most part for like my personal stuff. But really what I use for like my deep stuff, yeah, I'm using Chat with RTX. I'm using a couple local models in Olama. You know, I'm using localized models. Like, that's my number one, because that's where I do like the deep shit. Okay. So, you know, take that for what you will. Like, I am fully supportive and want everything to go in the direction of having large language models being run on local hardware by the end user. Okay. Now to get to wrapping this up. Okay. I hope I addressed every the complaints, you know, and with that song, yeah, I know the song's not perfect, because I had some people email me. It's like, I wasn't impressed by that song. You don't know the prompt that I put in. The prompt was nothing, and it came up with that. That's what was so impressive about it. If I did further prompting, did some remastering and other features that Suno AI has in it, where you can enhance the song, I'm sure it'd be even better. Okay. But I was just dicking around and it came up with that. And that blew my mind. No, it's not Judas Priest. It's not Amaranth. You know, it's not even Nickelback. Don't talk shit about Nickelback. But it was amazing for what I told it, for how little information I gave it. Blown away. Absolutely. I was floored. Deal with it. And I like it. God damn it. So, and that's all that matters, is if I like it. Okay. So the thing that J-Star actually mentioned because in a recent Q&A, we talked about like a person asked like what PC should they get, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And in that they also asked about the smart, or they mentioned they were getting a Pixel phone. I'm telling you, I would take a look at the new Razrs from Motorola as well, especially if you're getting in. I remember the question was specifically around AI feature sets. I would take a look at what Motorola is doing, because they're getting they're getting a whole picture. They're trying to put everything in it into what they're doing, and they have Smart Connect. All that looks wild. So just something to consider. Okay. Okay. So, but the thing that J-Star wanted to mention is Framework, which they've been made famous already for making upgradable laptops, and everything being very open source, and, even the hardware, like really allowing you to take control of your machine. Like, this is open source hardware and potentially open source software done right, if that's the way that you go, but you could put Windows on them if you wanted. But they have a desktop, the Framework desktop, which is a gorgeous looking little machine that has the Ryzen AI Max, the AMD Ryzen AI Max 300 series in it. It also has Wi-Fi 7, which actually I'm very excited about that, because Wi-Fi 7, the hardware hasn't had a proper driver for it, for AMD-based processors, only for Intel. And partly that's because of Intel's killer Wi-Fi and all that. And that's the name. It's not killer in that like, ooh, it's great. It's killer because that's the name. Okay. But I mean, you can do, you can get 100, talk about, like I mentioned with the RAM earlier, you can get an AMD, the Ryzen Max AI 395 processor, which is, I think, as high as that goes as far as models. And you can get 128 gig RAM in that. Fuck the 32 gig. You can go all the way. Oh, that's an exciting piece of kit. I mean, man, the things I would do, the cameras I would get in front of to get my hands on a fully loaded version of the Framework desktop, especially with the 395 Max in it and the 128 gig of RAM. Holy fuck. Like get me in there, man. I'm absolutely blown away. I mean, the prices, you're going to pay that premium, obviously. But you don't have to go that high if you don't want to. You can get on the lower end of it. But this is, in my opinion, like maybe the best AI pre-built desktop PC that you can get I mean, if you want a laptop, you might have to wait for some other Framework offering, but for the laptop or for a desktop, this is incredible. Absolutely incredible. I'll put a link in the show notes for this baby. You got to check that out. And especially if, if unlike with me, if money means, well, money doesn't mean anything to me, but like, you know what I mean? If money means nothing to you, okay, and you can just throw it away, or not throw it away, because you're going to get your money's worth out of this thing, I'm sure. And you're willing to wait just a little bit, you can pre-order one of these Framework desktops, and man, you are in for an AI time for sure. And just a great computing time in general. I mean, these things are little beasts. Very, very impressed by these. So that's something else to check out. I think that does it. There really is so much more that I can say. But I'm going to end off with this thought. Part of people's problems, J-Star's point that a lot of people's problems is that AI is going to take their job, the economic incentive around it, or the economic repercussions of it, is why a lot of people have negative thoughts about it. Okay. That's not something I think that should ever stop a technology from being developed. But the other problem is that people are thinking this is going to be like Skynet. I'll leave you with this cliffhanger on that. Okay. Like, A, that's not happening. B, science fiction. I hate the word psyop, but I'm going to use it this time. Science fiction in general might be the biggest psyop of all time. And it's a very hard thing for me to say, because I'm a person I'm the product of 1,000 sci-fi authors and writers. But maybe, just maybe, so many of the tropes, so many of the concepts that have come into this world through science fiction, maybe they're the problem. Now let's see how many patrons I lose. Or you can ask me the questions first. FU@xxtech.net, baby. Woo! Maybe we'll get into this one in a future episode. I will see all of you, on the other side.